Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
All right, what's up? Welcome in GC Live Wednesday episode of the show. Furman week rolling on. You hear the sounds of somebody smashing golf balls behind us. That's because we are live from Pro Swing Columbia in Chapin, South Carolina. I was just watching Chris hit a few, mostly hit them straight. That's what we'll tell people.
We can go with that, yeah.
Yeah, so
We're here to practice.
excited to be here. We're here to practice. Chris wanted to get in some practice. Shout out to Michael and Steve here helping us out. Awesome facility, Chris. I know you had a chance to partake a little bit here. What'd you think, man?
This is the best simulator I've ever seen for sure. It is an outstanding setup. You can practice, you can play courses, and a lot of options here. Go to ProSwingColumbia.com. You can either rent a bay by the hour, Wes, or they have membership options for you where you can join monthly, get hours of play. And another cool thing, Wes, plenty of sports, including access to college football games and ESPN. They have that here.
ESPN.
You can actually get ESPN here. They have it. You know they do. And they have an awesome bar here. Lots and lots of local. I think they got 20 craft beers here or so, including our friends at Steel Hands on tap. You can actually get Sandstorm Game Day Lager right here at Pro Swing Columbia. So ProSwingColumbia.com, 105 Snapdragon Court, Suite C here in Chapin.
And Integrated Media right next door.
Yep.
I told people on the radio. They came out and hooked my house up. They can do the same for you. Whole home Wi-Fi, hardwire the internet. Maybe you want to hook up the man cave. They can handle all those things for you. Find out a little bit more about what they got going on. IntegratedMediaInc.com. Again, Integrated Media Inc. INC. All right, man. So let's roll into week 2. We're here, believe it or not. Once you wait all season long for the actual football season to get here, then it does, and you kind of push on a lot off the edge of the mountain, and then it's flying at this point. So, coordinator speaking today, that was Loggins, of course, Clayton White, of course, Pete Limbo. Got a chance to listen to all of those earlier, and, we didn't really think that they would give away a whole lot, just knowing the personality of this group, but, something with Loggins, this is always where we talk about what we learned, what we maybe heard that caught our attention. I'll go first, and I'm going to start with Loggins. So I thought it was interesting, especially towards the end, the very last quote he had, the very last thing he said. I'm starting to notice Loggins carries himself with, I think, a certain type of confidence to where he is willing to wear it. And what I mean by that is we've all seen coaches where they'll put it on themselves, but then they'll kind of also put it on other people. You just get this sense that he 100% within his fiber believes we're in this together as an offense, and that he's at the top of that offensive chain. So, I really liked, if you're a South Carolina fan, if you're one of his players, the last thing he said was, if you're going to put it on anybody, put it on me. It's my fault. You kind of have, and we all know it wasn't all his fault. I don't really think play calling was one of the top 10 issues in the game, but you want the guy at the top, you want the leader of the group to take full command of what happened. Yeah. And so that may seem like a small thing, but if I'm part of the fan base out there listening, I liked that the OC didn't make excuses. He just said, at the end of the day, it's on me. I got to do better. And I think that speaks to maturity and confidence within himself.
Well, and speaking of confidence, you pointed this out earlier in the week, in that Loggins was asked before this game, why do you have confidence? And he didn't say, hey, we have this, and we have this, and we have this, and I'm a great play caller. He actually said Spencer Rattler, right? He's pointed to number 7. And so in the aftermath of the game, he spent a lot of time talking about how good Rattler was. I think we knew that. I think the numbers bear it out as well statistically. But just hearing him talk about how good Spencer was, how much he covered up, called him spaghetti sauce, says he covered up a lot of things during the game, pointing out some things. Hey, here's Spencer could have played a little better in this area, that area, but just gave him a lot of credit. I think it really validated, what we saw on the eye test, and then statistically, the type of game that Spencer Rattler had. And I think, Wes, you pointed this one out as well. There was some warning signs from Beamer and Loggins on the areas that they had that were concerning. That doesn't mean it was okay. That doesn't mean anybody expected 9 sacks and all the pressures that we saw, all the disruptions. I think Dowell Loggins said they had 18 disruptions over the course of the game. None of that's good enough. But you could tell he was concerned about those things going into the game, particularly the offensive line at tackle. That ended up playing out during the game. Fortunately, they had Rattler to play extremely well to cover those things up, and now it's just about finding a workable combination, which he did not blow smoke about, for sure, on the offensive line.
Yeah, he said it's still a work in progress. Yeah. And even if you go back and look at his press conference last week, he was asked, I think it was 2 different occasions, what gives you confidence in I can't remember if it was specifically offensive tackle or offensive line. At one point, they said, what gives you confidence in getting the running game going next week? And he sort of, or this week at the time, but this was last week going into the UNC game, and he basically kind of, I don't want to say avoided the question, but he turned the answer into saying, I'm excited to see what we do against a real opponent. So,
yeah.
He didn't come out and say, I think we're going to run the ball all over them. Our guys are completely ready. Today, he said this is still a work in progress on the offensive line. I thought he walked that line incredibly well, not throwing your guys under the bus while simultaneously taking credit for the issues, while also simultaneously saying, we've got to dig ourselves out of this, but it is going to be a process to do so. I think you got to kind of respect the honesty there, without it feeling at any point like he was throwing the players themselves under the bus. He even worked in a compliment for Nick Gargiulo and Vershawn Lee while simultaneously saying, look, it's on the offensive line as a whole. It's 5 guys working towards one goal, and then even past that, it's 11 people working towards one goal on offense. So just the demeanor so far of Dowell Loggins. Ultimately, fans will judge him on points, yards, quarterback recruiting probably.
Wins.
But, I think as far as in a comparison to what you saw fans kind of reacting to press conferences the last couple of years, I don't think you can find much fault in what he's had to say so far this year.
Sure, and to go back to the Vershawn and Nick shout out, that was another, I think, validation of what we saw. After the game, I know you and I talked, and that was kind of where we landed. Like, we thought Nick G played well, thought Vershawn did some good things in there. The rest of the spots were pretty spotty, right? Pretty up and down, or maybe just down in general. And so as you go into this week, or they're now fully in this week with it being Wednesday, obviously, searching for some answers there. And Wes, I get the sense they probably don't know for sure, right? If Dowell Loggins would have come in, Shane Beamer would have come in yesterday during his press conference and said, look, we've already identified the problems. We know exactly what we're going to do. We've got our 5. We're not going to tell you who they are, but we got our 5 and we're ready to roll. They're not saying that because I don't think they're at that point. And so we may see some different combinations during Furman. Maybe we see one combination that ends up working pretty well in that game. The next couple weeks, as we've said, are tough to get an actual read on, right? Furman, we know, is a really good team, and each of the staff members that we heard from today, Limbo, White, Loggins, they all, and Shane Beamer yesterday, 4 staff members all took special care to point out that this is a very capable Furman team, which they are. You're going to have to play a lot better up front. But you've got this game this week. You'll be bigger and stronger. That's the biggest difference, FCS to FBS, is going to be on the lines of scrimmage. You got to make it as such. But even if South Carolina can have a distinct advantage there, and it shows, you're still not going to learn a lot. Georgia game, given some of the issues we've seen, there's a chance that may not go as well on the lines of scrimmage, right? So Mississippi State, I know we've eyed as the game that, not that you're flushing the Georgia game by any means, not that you're looking past the Furman game, but the point is, he mentioned a process. I think it's going to be a process at least the first half of the season to maybe try to find out whether or not they can solve this issue up front.
Well, you look at just Furman and not just this team, but that program. Obviously, a lot of respect, especially I thought from Clayton White and Pete Limbo, because of their connections to that conference. And Limbo's a guy he's been around for so long now. He also gave a shout out to the Duke staff and was in no way a shot at Clemson. That wasn't one of those, let me be funny and take a shot at Clemson. It was legitimately, I didn't realize this, like half of the Duke staff has worked with Pete Limbo at one point, and lots of ties for him just to Furman over the years, and then Clayton White talking about starting his coaching career early on being at Western Carolina in the same conference. So, you get the feeling this staff, beyond just, this is a veteran Furman team, which they are. This might be the most veteran team South Carolina plays all year long. With the transfer portal, you don't see quite as many veteran teams as you once did. Furman has managed to keep guys around, and obviously it's a drop down in competition as far as what level they're at, but one of the most sort of junior and senior, just upperclassmen oriented teams that you're probably ever going to see. And so they return a bunch of starters, quite a bit of respect from the staff all the way around. And I don't know, man, it feels like it kind of has gone an inch or two past the typical, let me get my team's attention. This team is capable of beating you. How I know there's levels to everything. How far do you take this thing? Like, should Gamecock fans should they be preparing themselves for a close game on Saturday? Do you take it that far, or do you still think, hey, it's Furman, South Carolina should control most of this game?
Yeah, I mean, it should be a question mark in your mind at least, and I think there's going to be varying levels of fan. There might be some fans preparing for all this, Wes. You never know. Look, I reached out to someone this week who is kind of a college football guru and speaks to a lot of people, who has some connections to Furman, and the answer I got back was it's a dangerous team for the exact reason that you mentioned, the experience level. They're just incredibly solid and well coached and disciplined in all phases of the game. And so anytime you play a team like that, if you make a bunch of mistakes hosting a team like that, that's when you can get beat. That's when you can create some scary moments. So I'll go back to what I said earlier. Again, the biggest difference typically from the FBS to FCS level is going to be on the lines of scrimmage. So that means not only for Carolina's offensive line, but their defensive line, you have got to make that area an advantage. If you've got the size and the skill and the athleticism advantage, you have to make sure somehow or another that shows through. So it is an open-ended question, right? Neither line of scrimmage won those battles against North Carolina the other night. Can they win them against Furman? They can, because the skill level, the size will go down. But, man, I don't know, Wes, that you can look at this and say, yeah, South Carolina is just going to absolutely roll. This is not going to be a close game. If anything, you should probably lean a little bit more of, this is a prove-it game. This one's more of, this one could certainly be close in the second half.
As you know, every single show presented by our buddy Clint Hammond of Movement Mortgage. Check out clint.hammond.com. 803-771-6933. I was responding to a member on the Insiders Forum just this week. They were talking about maybe buying a second home. I said, call Clint. If you got questions, he can walk you through what all of your options are. He is located here in Columbia, but really throughout the state of South Carolina and actually some neighboring states. Clint can help walk you through the process of buying a home or just kind of seeing what options you may have. Again, 803-771-6933. Call Clint, and he'll help that process be pretty easy for you. Was there anything else with Loggins? I kind of pointed mine out. Was there anything else that just caught your attention above all else as far as what he said today? I thought he was kind of fiery a little bit today.
Yeah, and I think we hit the main things. And one other thing I would say, Wes, is that to my surprise a little bit, he got a little bit, went beyond the philosophical Dowell Loggins. He kind of dove in a little bit more. He did that thing that coaches do sometimes where they start talking in coach speak, and probably most of the media members assembled in the room are going, what in the world does that mean? Some will catch it. But talked about specific plays and specific concepts, some different things that they tried to do during the game. And I think the big takeaway from that was, taking out the football jargon, play calling lingo, is that, yeah, they tried a lot of things and they just weren't having success up front, which again does handcuff you as a play caller. There were some things that were good enough there. Wes, the thing that he kept going back to was 17-7. Xavier Legette, Spencer Rattler. You don't have Juice for a lot of the game. He didn't seem too happy with much of anything else. Even the skill guys. He didn't shout out the tight ends, even though they did some good things. Didn't shout out other receivers. Didn't shout out running backs. And so you can tell he feels like they have a long way to go offensively. And I don't think that's just motivation. I think that's really what he thinks.
Also talked a little bit about the North Carolina player who was saying, we knew what they were going to do before they did it. I've been torn on that whole thing. Like, you can tell, Loggins himself even said, hey, maybe we had an offensive lineman or two that were doing something that was tipping off.
A little light in your stance or something.
That's typically that's a lot of games. Guys will pick up on little, almost like micro cues but sometimes offensive linemen kind of choose and staffs choose, okay, they know we're going to throw anyway. It's worth it to go ahead and get more into a pass set stance because they already know you're throwing versus trying to trick anybody. And sometimes you're in a pass setting, more of a pass set stance, and you run the ball, on some type of draw, and you use that to work, your tendencies against your opponent. I certainly don't think North Carolina had any tendencies on South Carolina because it's a brand new coordinator.
Yeah, well, and I think he pointed out, I think what was that Kamon Rucker, who had a great day, by the way, but I think he was mainly saying, hey, the way that they were, the offensive linemen, and those are, you do see those, Wes. That's just film study or what you see in the game. This guy's heavy in his stance, maybe a run. He's lighter in his stance, maybe a pass. That's not necessarily a scheme thing. Sometimes that's an individual player thing. And Loggins even pointed out sometimes guys are raising their hands to indicate pass, and it wasn't a pass. Mm-hmm. So it can kind of go both ways with that thing. I don't know that that's extremely atypical. I think from game to game, college football players don't always say that. That probably happens in every game. I'm not saying it was good, right? I'm not saying you don't need to clean that up. You obviously do. Was that the reason they lost the game, is because North Carolina had the book on them, so to speak? I don't think so. I think it was more about individual one-on-one losses and matchups, especially up front.
Yeah, and he even talked about if you plugged in to the analytics, hey, our quarterback completed almost 80% of his passes, 30 of 39, didn't turn the football over. Won the turnover battle really by 3 to an extent because that's a turnover in the books. Even you can extend it out. Both teams went for it on fourth and didn't get it at one point. Maybe you count that as turnover. Either way, I know it's not an official turnover, but
should be. That's one of my crusades.
Analytically, it's pretty much the same. But point being, and I was sitting there thinking through everything he was listing out. And Beamer even talked about this to an extent on Tuesday. Hey, look, here are our general game-to-game, every single game, keys to victory. Mm-hmm. And we did this. But all that was completely, entirely wiped out by the lack of a running game, the too many negative plays, quarterback getting hit. And then on the other side, I thought it was interesting, as we sort of roll into Clayton White, Clayton said, you generally just naturally will get 6 to 7 tackles for loss in a game. And I got to thinking about if you look at Carolina's defensive stats, North Carolina averaged about 4.3 yards per carry. That's, from a defensive standpoint, that's not great, but that's not, you just got ran. We saw them have far worse efforts than that at times last year. Mm-hmm. That's not a terrible day at the office. But the difference was they weren't able to force North Carolina to be behind the chains, whereas South Carolina's behind the chains. Constantly.
I think Dowell Loggins said that they had 10 3rd and 7 pluses in the game. Even with Spencer Rattler, and even if you had good protection, that's not a number you want to be at.
Yeah, so on the other side, you're expecting the reason you're not able to get off the field on defense, because not getting off the field is more of a symptom, I think,
Yeah.
not like the actual problem. The problem is you're not when you get a 2nd and 13 as a defense as opposed to even a 2nd and 7. It's like, okay, you played it pretty well up front. You got the guy on the ground. You held him 3 yards, but you didn't create anything negative for the opponent. So if that happens over and over and over, that's why you see 2nd and 7, 3rd and 2, first down, 2nd and 6, 3rd and 1, first down. And next thing you know, North Carolina has the ball inside the 20. By that point, it's a 9-play drive. You're tired, and it just kind of builds on itself. So I think that's part of the reason that tackles for loss are such a big stat, man. And it wasn't just that South Carolina had those issues on offense. To me, it was the comparison of what their issues were on offense compared to what was going on defense for South Carolina. You've got to have those negative plays. They didn't even get what Clayton White considered to be like the norm, 6 to 7.
Just a baseline, you go out there and you play defense, even if you play it poorly. A lot of times you get that. Yeah, it was a huge contrast. So the two things that stood out to me with White, number one, he talked about not finishing plays as being what he thought the reason. Tackles for loss. It's not like they had no opportunities, right? They had some shots at Drake May. I think they hurried him 9 times, and I think they hit him like 5 times. You got to turn a couple of those into a sack or a play that maybe Drake May can't extend enough to throw the ball up and complete it, or maybe not letting him scramble out there. They held him, did a pretty good job with him actually in the run game, and that he didn't have a lot of yards, but they did let him escape sometimes. They did let him break the pocket, and he had some nice runs to extend drives. So that's something you got to clean up. You got to be able to finish better. Secondly, Wes, one thing that stood out to me, we know the edge position didn't give him a lot of production, but I was curious to hear his take on the interior of the defensive line. It was very interesting that he kind of went there and saying, somebody asked specifically about Boogie, Huntley, and Tonka. And he said, look, he basically said, paraphrasing, they didn't get enough from those two guys in the first game, which I thought was interesting. Probably would have expected more. He said, hey, if you ask those guys, they tell you the same thing. And he felt like they identified not, an effort issue.
Not a little more about technique.
Technique, not getting whooped, not effort, but technique that Travian Robertson, the defensive line coach, already picked up on. So the hope, Wes, has to be that those are things you can correct. And with guys like Tonka, Boogie, you feel like you probably can get those corrected. Sometimes you just get in the game, maybe first game too, and you just fall back a little bit on not your training, but just your athleticism. That could get you in trouble, when you're playing against a good team.
Well, yeah, and I think especially if it's something you're maybe not quite there yet on, and you it's kind of like, all right, let me go back to what I'm comfortable doing versus something maybe I'm trying to implement into that spot where I'm completely comfortable doing it. But it's more like, no, I've been doing it like this my whole life. Now I'm playing an opponent. Maybe I'm not as comfortable doing this new thing. So, I thought that was kind of interesting.
It was.
Trying to think. Oh, he was asked about tackling. Trying to think back to the game. I don't know if the stats or analytics back it up or not. For a game 1, I don't know, man. I didn't feel like it was like a
missed tackle fest. Yeah,
I've watched some missed tackle fests, and I know y'all have too.
And we have.
You don't tackle to the ground in practice a ton. If you ask me, that ain't on the top of my list of issues. Now there were some times, like Drake May made you miss in the open field. Now some of that is just he's pretty good at that, and you see this big quarterback come running out of there. It's 1-on-1. There's a lot of space, and you're a linebacker. You get a little ahead of yourself and say, I'm about to pop him, and you realize actually I need to just break down because he's a little more athletic than I gave him credit for, and it happens like that. So to me, can it improve? I think Clayton White ended up settling on a C+ for tackling. That seems fair.
Yeah.
Maybe even a notch higher, I think, for a game 1 if you're going to grade it on a curve. To my eyes, and maybe it's just me, but I just didn't see that as being some glaring issue in this game compared to what the other glaring issues were.
No, I agree, and I don't have the stats in front of me, Wes. I want to say I did look at it earlier, and you weren't seeing 4 missed tackles for this player, 5 for this player, 3 for this player. I want to say it was probably more in the like 10-ish range overall, which is not terrible. I think what the issue did become is some of that number, they were critical plays, right? Missing Drake May, not getting Drake May in the backfield, maybe a running back scooting out of there and turning a 2-yard run into 7. We did see a few of those, and in a game like this, they become more magnified when you do miss a tackle.
Yeah, for sure, man. Pete Limbo, great as always.
It was.
Did you have anything else on Clayton? I think that was
No.
I think that was pretty much it. I'm amazed with Limbo's ability to not even be critical, that's not the word for it, but to give an honest representation of what he thinks about each of his units and how they performed while praising individuals, but then giving an honest assessment without throwing players themselves under the bus. It's like praise individuals, criticize groups.
Yep.
You know, so he felt good, I think, for a game one, and he would clearly tell us, I feel like, if he didn't.
Yeah.
He felt good about pretty much everybody but kickoff return.
Yeah. And remember, to your point, Wes, about him not blowing smoke, there was a game last year, you might be able to come up with it, or maybe somebody in our chat. There was one game, and I think they won the game last season, and he came in and was like, I was not happy with the way our special teams played. Like, he just wasn't having it. Was happy with it in this game. They obviously did some good things. The one thing that he did point out, Wes, but very specifically, was on kick return. He felt like the one that was North Carolina, remember, got the taunting penalty. So they had to kick it. It was a short kick to Xavier Legette. And I also, sitting there watching it live, was like, man, that was a big missed opportunity. They just didn't get what they needed out of that. It was a short return. He felt like they did not block well at all on that return, and it showed.
Yeah, it did. Before we go any further, going to tell you about our friends at Game Time and the Game Time app, also at gametime.co. That's not gametime.com, gametime.co. This is the fastest growing, I don't know how they track this, but from what I'm told, it's the fastest growing ticket app out there. The reason for that is because the Game Time guarantee, which I'm going to tell you all about here in a second. Had some friends who bought their tickets Saturday very, very late in the process. If that's you, you don't have to stress. You can use the Game Time app. I used the Game Time app 2 years ago, going to Atlanta, went to the World Series, had a fantastic experience both in the game and with the ticket buying experience. Use the code GameCocks right now. All you got to do is download the Game Time app, create an account, use code GameCocks. If it's your first purchase, you will get $20 off. Terms do apply, so check all the fine print and stuff, but if it's your first time, you'll get $20 off. Also, Game Time guarantee, like I said, that means you'll always get the best price. If you find tickets in the same section and row for less anywhere else, Game Time will credit you with 110% of the difference. So they've got football, basketball, baseball, concerts, comedy, theater, and more, but we pretty much use it for football, or in my case, MLB. Might use it in the playoffs.
NBA playoff game for me a couple years ago in Denver, Wes. Game Time.
Use Game Time app?
Absolutely.
Best,
worked like a charm.
Best app for last-minute purchases. They also have flash deals that will pop up and give you a little bit more off as well. So definitely awesome for playoff games. Check them out, gametime.co, or just go to the App Store or Google Play. Is that what they call it on Android? Go to any of the app stores, download Game Time app. Appreciate them for being a sponsor, not just for our show, but many of the different shows throughout the On3 network. Speaking of On3 network, Jalen Kilgore got a shout out from a buddy, Charles Power.
Yep.
He was a week one college football freshman.
Standout. Yeah, I think that's the word. Yep, standout. 10 tackles, Wes. I think was one of, if not the highest graded players on the team per PFF for defense. Did a really good job tackling. Again, 10 tackles, 63 snaps. Now, probably would have played in this game anyway, I would think a bit. Nicky Memori going down very early, comes back, can't finish the game. Hopefully he'll be better soon. Doubtful for this weekend, so that means we'll be seeing more of Jalen Kilgore again in week one. But I thought he flashed, Wes. I thought he looked really good out there. First action of his college football career on that stage in an unexpected fashion, kind of like Nicky Manwari last year.
Yeah.
And comes in for R.J. Roderick after an injury and just kind of rides it out. Now, when Nicky comes back, he'll be the starter. But Kilgore, I think, word of the day, Wes, validation. I think he has already validated the type of guy that we thought he could be.
Man, this is going to you don't want to lose Nicky, obviously, and they got to be very careful with that hamstring. I know Nick's apparently saying he wants to play, he's going to play. You gotta be so careful with that. Stuff like that will linger if you don't just shut it down. Beamer, by the way, saying today, SEC teleconference, that Nicky still doubtful for this game. I'd be absolutely shocked. Even if he woke up Saturday and felt great, you got to be very careful with that. But I think my point being, these snaps that Kilgore is going to now get will be huge for him moving forward. I think once they do get Imamori back, that's going to give them a little bit of chance to maybe get creative.
Yeah, a little flexibility.
Yeah. You know, depending on how Kilgore plays, which I imagine he's going to keep playing very, very well, he just didn't look scared. Like, you know, some guys, and they can end up being great players, but we've all seen guys go in and they're kind of, you know, they kind of got the wide-eyed look. He looked like, oh, yeah, this is where I'm supposed to be.
Well, Kilgore, I mean, he's just a football player. I mean, I won't get any points for creativity, but this is a guy that played all three phases in high school, and he excelled at all three phases, and he's got all the physical tools. I finally realized who he reminds me of from a physical perspective. Kind of looks like Co Simpson back in the day. Remember Co? He had the big like the high shoulders. Jalen Kilgore's got a little bit of that. But, man, he does not look like your typical freshman and doesn't play like it either. So, moment was definitely not too big for him.
If he can show the ball skills that Co had throughout his career, then Gamecocks will be on to something, man. Co was incredible to watch at South Carolina. But you like what he brings. I do wonder who's your first man up, your next man up at safety now. Obviously, we know Kilgore slides in. He's a starter for this week. You know, who slides up in there behind him. It was interesting. They rolled B.J. Gibson out there at the very beginning because I imagine it was like, we got to at least look this freshman in the eye and, you know, hey, man, this is where we're at. It's on you. Right. But they very quickly shifted to saying, you know, hey, we're rolling Jalen out there and letting him play. Charles Power has always been high on Kilgore, 4-star guy on 3. I'll steal your word, validate. I mean, I think that's been validated already. This guy's going to play a ton of great ball for South Carolina. And I think has some versatility too. Could he be a lockdown nickel back potentially at some point? Maybe. I think they got to figure out, you know, I've thought about this. Bakari Swain, are you going to need him at cornerback at some point this year? Maybe so, but remember, he played safety in high school. I know long-term, they think he's a corner. Long-term, does he play some wide receiver? But now-term, right now, could we see Bakari start to be in that rotation at safety? Maybe a little bit easier transition for him, being a spot that he has played before. That's not one of the things we've heard. That's just speculation on my part. But it would make sense, a guy that athletic, that talented. We all saw what he did in high school. Very similar. So Kilgore and Bakari had similar high school careers in that they were offense, defense, special teams, help you in every single way. Hashtag football player, I feel like.
Yeah.
They need football player shirts. Or football guy shirts, I guess, would be the accurate way to say it. But we'll see, man. I think a lot of fans, I think us, you know, we are as well. We're all intrigued to see how deep the youth movement may go the next few weeks.
Pretty deep. And Shane Beamer's been very clear. I mean, he set the stage many times before the season, over and over. It kind of built, right, in volume and in strength as far as how much he was saying, hey, guys, look, we're going to be playing a freshman at almost every position. That didn't happen in week 1, but it will happen. And it was even alluded to today. I can't remember which coach said this, but it was just kind of week 1, you weren't going to have as many freshmen out there in that setting. That doesn't mean you won't in week 2, week 3, week 4. You're going to let it continue to build. So Pup Howard, he's going to be out there. We know some offensive linemen can get in the mix. Marky Anderson was the number one guy that Beamer would point to, that he hadn't been in the mix and is still doubtful for this weekend because of his injury, right? Otherwise, we may have heard more. But they're going to continue getting these guys as the season progresses in the mix more. So I think the youth movement is just going to continue to grow, really, on this football team.
Yeah, so I think it was Clayton White that was talking about Pup.
Yeah.
And, they had we also learned they had plans for Mo Kaba to play about 30 snaps on defense. It almost kind of sounded like maybe the plan was we already knew and had reported that Mo was playing both Mike and Will. I wonder if it was just going to be Stone, Debo, and then Mo giving them both breathers.
10 snaps here, 10 here.
And then they played, 73, 72?
Yeah.
So maybe you take 15 snaps off of each of those guys and give those 30 to Mo. That probably makes a lot of sense for what it would have been. And, I think it was just a matter at that point. You're in a close game. You're trying to come from behind. Linebackers are playing well. No signs. We talked about this as well. There were no real signs that they were winded. Like the actual conditioning was not a factor.
Mm-hmm.
Clayton White went as far as saying, I won't let that happen again.
Mm-hmm.
But it kind of felt like on offense and defense, you heard Loggins say we got to a point in the game where we just said, like, forget being balanced.
Mm-hmm.
We just forget the future, forget our blueprint. We have to try to find a way to win this game.
Mm-hmm.
And it became put it on 7.
Yeah.
On defense, I think you were probably saying we can get Pup in there next week. Right now, we just got to play the guys who have been there before, even if they're not that experienced. And I think that youth movement certainly extends to linebacker. It was confirmed by Clayton White exactly what we would have said, and that's Pup and Bam Martin-Scott are kind of your backups now. I actually think you feel pretty good about those guys as the season goes on, man. Like those 4, that's still a better 4, I believe, in terms of talent, athleticism, upside, ability, than South Carolina's had the last 2 years. I think you start to get nervous if you start to dip into that depth even more if one of those guys goes down.
Yeah, got to stay healthy there now at that position. And, well, that's the case at a lot of spots. You felt good. You felt like you probably had, 5 there, potentially, depending on how, they like Pup a lot, but we haven't seen him in a game yet. So, pending how he developed, pending Bam's health with a healthy Mo Kaba, you probably felt like you had 5 guys and you could keep everybody fresh and roll them in and out. But that plan has already been shot, unfortunately, for South Carolina. But still more depth, still in a decent spot. Mo Kaba was a big loss, special teams, big loss at linebacker, no doubt about it. You can't sugarcoat that one. But still in a decent spot if they can stay healthy there.
Yeah, and I would think, let's base it off, let's say if you had 75 snaps, if they were going to play, if we're kind of right, so we know they were going to play Kaba 30 snaps, if it was going to be kind of split between the two, you're really looking at, in an ideal world, out of 75 snaps, you're going to play the starters maybe 60 snaps as opposed to all, 72 to 75 or whatever. And then maybe that means Pup and Bam Martin-Scott are playing 15 each, at those spots. Give or take, more or less, game, score, all that stuff is obviously a factor. You would hope this would be a week you can rotate those guys in a lot. I've always thought Bam Martin-Scott kind of an underrated guy. Like, he's got some traits to him.
He does.
He's actually got some pass rush juice, long arms. Pup's a long-armed guy. Actually looks like the first time I saw Pup Howard from afar, I mistook him for Jordan Birch.
Yeah, wearing 5, standing back there. Like, oh, this is a new package. Got an edge back there.
Yeah.
Like, well, Jordan Birch isn't here anymore.
He's in Oregon.
He's in Oregon.
So, but yeah, those guys can play well and can help this team, and they're going to have to. I think we talked about this yesterday, man. Depth chart. Don't get caught up in the Monday depth chart. Mike Yuva mentioning, the potential of, Nick Gargiulo could maybe play tackle potentially. Ja'Kai Moore could. That's already been half of that's been confirmed because they have Ja'Kai listed as an or starter at right tackle. So we know that's a possibility. Go ahead and throw Tro Ball and Tree Babalade in there as possibilities at some point. I honestly would be pretty surprised if we don't see both those guys, so Ball and Babalade, make their debut this weekend in some form or fashion, whether that's starting or just getting in there at some point in the game. Yeah, I would be surprised if we don't see them make their debut.
Yeah, Tree Babalade more likely at left tackle when he is in the game. And Tro Ball, probably left guard, Wes. He's worked at both guard spots and at center. But they have, 7 guys out there snapping in preseason camp. Only a few of them would be, actual game time guys unless it was an emergency situation. But I feel like probably better suited to be a guard. And look, remember what Loggins said today. He didn't seem satisfied with hardly anything except for Vershawn Lee and Nick Gargiulo. So you figure those 2 guys are somewhere. The one I don't see moving is Vershawn Lee at center. That seems unlikely. Gargiulo, we know, could plug in basically anywhere if he were to move. Those 2 guys are still in there. Beyond that, I don't know if we can make a bold prediction, really, even on who else is out there. Or we can make a bold prediction, but we don't know actually from an information standpoint who's going to be out there.
Yeah, I think we have little snippets of what they could be thinking, but also we don't have the huge added value of actually being out there and kind of knowing how it looks. I think we have an idea of some things they may try, but obviously if it just blows up in practice, they're not going to probably do it on Saturday. So it does seem to me, and I think fans will be happy to hear this, I think they are committed to testing out some different ideas. I really don't think this is by any indication that this is, we're just going to roll the same group out there,
right?
And hope
for the best.
Yeah, hope for the best. So I've seen this question a couple times, and I'll hit this from Craig. And Craig's a great listener and viewer of our show. Don't take this personal, Craig. I don't agree. So for those who can't see it, saying in hindsight, should Kaba have been on the kickoff team coming off an ACL? And then Craig even says, easy to second guess now. I get it. I personally have no problem with them being out there. It's a different knee than the last injury. So it's not even like he went out there and injured the same knee on kickoff team. He's one of your better guys in that role. I mean, take one look at Mo Kaba. You're like big, fast, physical guy. When it happened, he was flying down the field to make a play. Yeah, like you said, hindsight, like I get it. It's easy to question that. But they've built their entire team around the idea, their entire program, I should say, around the idea of special teams are just as important as offense or defense. You treat it that way. You can get hurt on offense or defense too. I personally had no problem whatsoever with Kaba being out there on special teams. I just feel for the person, for the human being.
Terrible. It was terrible for him. But yeah, I mean, look, the best special teams units in the country always play starters. And so it could have very easily been Xavier, Legette, or O.D. Fortune, who were shouted out today by Pete Limbo for their work on the gunner team last year. Darius Rush, Jalen Brooks, gunners, could have gotten hurt in that role because they're flying down the field as punt gunners too. And it would be unfortunate if they got hurt, just like it's unfortunate if they're, out there blocking, like we saw with one of Marcus Lattimore's injuries. You're just out there kind of in no man's land. Those things can happen. South Carolina, like you said, Wes, if you truly make it a third of the game, you want to be able to play your best players. You can't say, man, let's be really, really good on special teams, but we're not going to play any starters on special teams. That's tough to do. And so when you look at the best special teams units in the country, they're going to play starters. Georgia plays a lot of starters. I remember they had a running back. I think it was Zamir White went down one year with an ACL injury in practice working on special teams, and it was a big storyline there. So it's a decent thought to have. It's a fair thought to have. but I can't get on board with it. I think you play your best guys. You have to be careful with it. You have to be smart with it.
Yeah.
Which they are. They chart those things. But if you want to be good, you got to play good players. So,
Yeah, and, I think Limbo, and I don't know if he would ever say it this way, but Limbo also, if you really chart who's out there, look at kickoff return. He's already said non-negotiable. Look at the gunner spot. It's always been a starter or a semi-starter, like a rotation top rotational guy. You look at some other positions. You may say, if you're not really super familiar with the roster, you may say, "Wait, who's that number?" Like they don't just throw their whole offense and defense out there on special teams. Like I think they're very deliberate about, okay, you can play a walk-on here, you can play a walk-on here, you can fill in the blanks with walk-ons, but you got, I mean, how many times did y'all watch South Carolina struggle to cover kickoffs in the past? And you look out there and maybe you say, I don't really know who that guy is, that guy. And it's, hey, if you're throwing all walk-ons and third or fourth teamers, freshmen out there, you're probably going to struggle to cover kickoffs.
Well, look, here's a great example, Wes, and Gamecock fans are hoping they don't change it, but the last play, not the last play of the game, but the big fumble last year in the Clemson-Carolina game, Carolina's got their guys out there, lots of starters, lots of key reserves and big special teams guys, and even Clemson fans are going through saying, who's that? It makes a difference.
It makes a huge difference. So, I think and JD is saying you protect your players. I mean, if the guy is cleared, it wasn't the same ACL. So that kind of, it wasn't the same knee.
All indications were that he was 100%.
Yes.
Going in. He was coming off an injury.
Yes.
Right. Just like Jordan Strong was.
Yeah.
But
he could have easily gotten hurt on the 30 snaps on defense, playing a physical linebacker position where you're in the fray. You got people rolling into you, falling around you, guys at your feet, guys at your knees. I don't know, man. Mo Kaba came to South Carolina to play football. He wanted to be on the field. He was cleared. He was 100%. Maybe if it was maybe if he just starts running and the same knee gives out, and it wasn't touched or something, you'd say, well, he shouldn't have been cleared.
Yeah.
He wasn't. But this was a contact injury, from what I could tell, and it was a different one. So it sucks. It's the only way to say it. But I can't really put blame on freak accidents. You know what? I want to go back real quick to Loggins because something caught my attention that I forgot about, and then when we were talking about something else, it kind of triggered it in my brain. So, how about Loggins throwing the shout out to Legette? He kept mentioning 17, obviously, but you remember that comment about, hey man, from the second I arrived here, bowl practice to January to every step of the way, Legette hasn't missed practices.
Yep.
And I'm gonna kind of point something out also as a way just of showing the progress Legette has made. I feel like early in his career, some of it probably not his fault. Early in his career, Legette was kind of one of those guys that always seemed to be dealing with being banged up. Something was ailing him. Maybe some missed practice time here or there. But to hear that Legette went through, this is September 6th, and the coach is saying this guy hasn't missed anything dating all the way back to the beginning of the year. Just a huge credit to him, to his progress, to him taking care of his body and putting himself in a position to be able to do that. I don't really know Legette like personally like that, except for just interactions with him here and there. But I could not be happier for a guy than I am for that guy. From what I hear, not that this is any breaking news, but the NFL scouts have quickly started circling who's that guy? What do I need to know about him?
Yeah.
He is on the radar now. If he keeps up what we saw, I don't even know if you could put a ceiling on how high he could go.
Well, and he surpassed last season's yardage total. Dowell was
He must
listening,
have heard your
obviously,
stat.
obviously listening to Gamecock Central Takeover Hour
Heard
the
your
other day.
stat.
Yeah, so I mean, in one game he surpassed last season's yardage total, right? And so he's a great example of why you don't give up on a guy if it's evident that they have talent. Again, I think I said this the other day. Sometimes guys that are in their third year, fourth year, fifth year, maybe you set the bar lower because you understand that athletically maybe they're just not there. Maybe from what they were in high school, they were so far ahead of everybody. When they get to college, they're not. Legette has man among boys qualities, and he always has. Remember Wes, story that I go back to often. Very first time I heard Xavier Legette's name, he was a high school quarterback. He gets to Carolina as a freshman. Didn't really factor in, but just heard about him covering kicks in practice and how fast he was, how big he was. It's been a long road. Sometimes some people have written him off, but I think you stay with him, and to his credit, he stayed with it because he just does have such tremendous athleticism. Another thing that's going to help him, hopefully he can continue his trajectory this season of being very productive as a receiver, but he can return kicks, he can cover kicks. It's going to give him a lot of love at the NFL level because of that versatility and the willingness as well to do it.
Dude, I know you were on this one prior to the season as a possibility for him, being one of those key gunners. He was flying down the field on punts, and so that's going to be big. He and OD Fortune, I think both have. It's one game, but both those guys. OD obviously hasn't quite gotten the attention for his game that Legette did, but I thought OD, man, that guy was playing confidently and with physicality too, which you don't always see from cornerbacks. So both those guys got shout outs from Limbo today for flying down the field as a gunner, and I think they're going to be a huge part of what South Carolina does on that front for basically most of the season. But Legette, hey, we've always said, man, if y'all get a chance to see that dude up close, it screams NFL. Screams NFL linebacker when you first look at him, but seriously screams NFL wide receiver, physical specimen. So happy for him that he's putting it all together. I frankly did not get to hear the final half of Limbo. Was there anything else from him that?
Nothing else really jumped out. Just kind of looking back at that game, the biggest takeaway, Wes, was that he was pretty happy with everything except kickoff returns. So he did kind of set the table and leave the door open for some personnel shifts, some tweaks, some changes on that particular unit. Maybe some other ones too as they dive into it. But that's the one where if you look week to week, I think we may see some personnel tweaks.
Yeah, and if you really want to nerd out on that stuff, check out my details you may have missed. I tried to chart out. Let's see, what did I do? I did kickoff, return, kickoff, and punt team. We'll probably do punt return team next week. Maybe throw the field goal team in there as well. But like to kind of give those guys a little bit of love. And I'm always curious, too, which guys are playing multiple special teams units. Generally, that's a good sign for, okay, this is a future guy to look out for. Or, hey, this is a walk-on who does everything that's asked of it. It's a sign of how guys are considered among the staff within the program. All right, we're going to close it out here in a second. But, Chris, I don't know about you, man. I'm sitting here with zero taxiety, and I know you are, actually, because
feeling great.
You already talked to Larry. You got your taxes figured out for
it's all mapped out. They're not filed yet for next year. They'll be a little early. But I've talked to my guy Larry, met with him in person, my wife and I, and then we followed up with him. Wes, I was blown away, honestly. You don't get that type of customer service very often. By him following up really immediately, more phone calls, texts, emails, super available to us. We met him at his office on St. Andrews Road, 2 locations out there in Irmo, 803-462-5576. Zero taxiety. Get out in front of it. Make sure, don't let it creep up. Go talk to the team at Liberty Tax. Larry does an awesome job.
All right, guys. So this was a Wednesday show. Mike will have a Thursday show. We didn't have a UNC guest last week.
Nope.
I know we don't have a Furman.on3.com website. I'm going to find us a Furman guest. That is my promise. We can't go 2 weeks in a row.
Yeah,
We won't
yeah.
have any problem finding a Georgia guest next week, but we need a Furman guest. So basically, right now you got Mike will be on tomorrow around 2 o'clock. Then Chris and I will be back normally scheduled Friday show. That will be the schedule throughout the year. If you missed it last night, you can go back and watch Mike's Talking Tuesdays. That'll be every Tuesday night. Like to throw in a little opportunity for the evening crowd to watch live as well. So that's, I think, going to do it for today. He's Chris. I'm Wes. We've been live from Pro Swing Columbia. Dude, this place is freaking awesome. Great place to maybe have a beverage. I see they got Steel Hands Sandstorm Game Day Lager over here, along with some other great local breweries that have their beer on tap. And then, dude, the actual swing technology behind us,
It's phenomenal.
pretty crazy.
Yep, we're about to go play. So you can rent bays by an hour, or you can get a monthly membership here. ProSwingColumbia.com is where you can find out more about how to get over here.
All right, guys. He's Chris. I'm Wes. Appreciate y'all. We'll see y'all on Friday. Have a good one.